Hey guys, back with another podcast this evening, and it is this evening, so it's going to be a late one with this one going out. It's been a busy day as we get ready to launch our webinar this week. This is the first webinar that we have done as a centre, so there's a lot going behind the scenes production wise that we have to get done to ensure that we can give the best information to everybody and to make sure that you get the best out of the webinar itself. So, without further ado, this week's episode is going to be a little bit about the skills, the secret skills that you need to be a good personal trainer. And it ties in rather nicely with the webinar. So, if you don't know about the webinar, it's on Thursday at 7 p.m. and we will be covering what we've said are the 5 secrets or success secrets of the 3% personal trainer. And the 3% personal trainer is the personal trainer that has still got a business after 1 year. The statistics in the UK haven't really budged much in the way of personal trainers gaining success, and that's a shame because when I started the industry it was 97% of personal trainers fail in their first year, and now it's 90% still, and in some cases, depending on who you get your statistics from, that goes up to 93%. So there hasn't been much change since 2012 when I started as a personal trainer. Now, what does that mean for you if you're wanting to become a personal trainer or you have a personal training business that's in its first year? Well, it could mean a few things, and certainly it's going to give you apprehension about the future, and we don't want that. Simply, we don't want that. So the 3% personal trainer is myself, really, and my experiences and the experiences of other trainers that are still going well into their decade plus of personal training. And when we looked at all the different personal trainers, myself included, tutors included, people we know that are successful, and we looked at all their traits and all the things that they did, there was 5 things that really jumped out the page at us, because everybody has their own means and methods and their own ideas of fitness and nutrition and so on. So to see these 5 things pop out was great, and that's why, as I said, we'll be spending a lot of time getting this webinar together so we can then give back those secrets. So I digressed a little bit. To the point of today's podcast, it is really to kind of go over a secret skill that not everybody has, unfortunately, and will definitely be a massive factor in you being a successful personal trainer. And right off the bat, let's get those kind of secret skills out the way. They are personality. If you don't have the personality, you won't succeed. Again, if you don't have the manners and the professionalism, then you're not going to succeed in this industry. So when we talk about key skills, it's really basic things that unfortunately are starting to disappear in this day and age, like holding the door for another person. Everybody used to think that you can't hold the door unless it's a lady, but it shouldn't be that case. It's just manners. And again, if you don't have manners, you're going to be less successful in this industry. Again, having a drive to help people is definitely going to be another thing that makes you successful in this industry. So these secret things, these skill sets that not everybody has, and yet we see some people come into the industry who for want of better words, lack these things and then try to make a success of themselves and then blame everybody else because they can't make a success of themselves. And I've seen it not too often in my kind of case. I'm lucky enough, the majority of the people and students I've ever worked with have been really good people. But we do see it. We see it time and again. And again, the massive thing that we see at the end of the story is the victimhood of that person and them being the victim when it was a case of not looking inwardly. That certainly was the thing that they could have done to stop that from happening. And again, when you want to play victim and that's what you want to do, there's no thing somebody can tell you that's going to help you stop that. So it's up to that person to decide. So let's get down to it. So personality, what do we mean by personality? When we look at successful personal trainers, we look at personal trainers who are energetic and bubbly and confident in themselves. And let's be honest, there's going to be a lot of that in the personal training industry, but that's what's attractive to most people. And just being a good person can be enough sometimes. You know, people see the value in good people and they will want to work with good people. But when you have that kind of extroverted personality type, then you can come out of your bubble and go and attract the people in for yourself, you know, rather than using tricks of the trade or tools or whatever you want to call it to get customer acquisition. So being bubbly is certainly going to be a really helpful personality trait, but I've seen very successful personal trainers who are more introverted, but having that ability to go and get your audience is going to be massively helpful on the success of your business. So I would take a look at that before you decide on becoming a personal trainer, or if you are a trainer, what kind of personality type do you have? I always like to get trainers to think about this, and I personally am a little bit of both. I'm introverted and extroverted. I'm extroverted when it comes to the workplace and when I have to do my job, but I'm introverted when I'm alone. I need my time to reset. I need my time to almost gather my energy back. And some people will call that being ambivert. So it's a kind of in between of the kind of personality types. But for the most part, it's just I have a time when both suit me and I get the best out of the both worlds that way. And if that is something that you can do, if you're not an extrovert to start with, then I would certainly recommend it. Learning how to have another kind of personality type is not going to be bad psychologically. If anything, it's very helpful. And when I was speaking to a student recently who was having a little bit of issue with taking their first cycle class, I spoke to them about the kind of representation I would do in a class, and it's certainly not something everybody will do, but it's having a persona. So if I'm taking a cycle class, very much a lot of the time I will be Army drill instructor Neil. And that's because he gets the best out of the class. He is very energetic, he's very vocal, he relies on feedback and people being involved. He wants to hear his troopers or his spin class get involved with things and actually reply back to responses. So it becomes a very much different person from who I am a lot of the time individually. And that's why having that persona can actually take away the fear you might have for maybe even going and speaking to a client for the first time, or if it is a class situation, just take away the fear of you having to be there and up on a stage and you could make mistakes. Again, for the most part, customers, clients, people in the class, they aren't going to notice when you make a mistake because they are following the instructor, and the instructor is you, and what you say goes. There may be the odd person that challenges you if you did something really exceptional, but if you miss a cue on a spin track to sprint, or you miss something out, it's not going to be the end of the world. It's certainly not going to be something that's going to dissuade people from taking your class, and pardon me, and it certainly isn't going to be something that makes you a bad instructor. So having that persona just allows you to set aside all those kind of negative factors you might have in your head and move forward. And how great is that? If you can do that, that's amazing. So personality, definitely you want to exude that energy, because people come to you for your energy a lot of the time. And that's what you actually want to give to people. People, sometimes I'll call them energy sponges, but they're not energy sponges. But they will soak up a lot of your energy, which is why, personally, I need to go and then gather my energy back at the end of a day. So factor these things into, obviously, your working situation. So if you are that kind of extrovert, introvert type, make sure you've got some time for yourself just to gather that energy back, especially if you're taking multiple classes and multiple sessions. It can be very draining. And again, obviously, and this is something you learn if you've done my business course, or if you've been on a good business course, is to break up your day properly by giving yourself maybe a half hour to have food and drink and a 5 minutes to yourself, or factor into the training of your clients so you can have a toilet break or a quick protein shake or whatever it is. But don't be one of these trainers who does 10 sessions in a row and then complains because they haven't ate all day. What I used to find was clients would be perfectly fine with you bringing a protein shaker on the gym floor and drinking from that if you needed to, because it's only drinking, but you're still getting sustenance. So try to remember these things. Again, personality-wise, you want to be the energy for somebody else, so you don't want to have any negative traits when you're on that gym floor. And again, that comes down to your body language as well. And again, something we speak about very much on the business course is about how people actually come to terms with who you are without ever meeting you. So when somebody walks in a gym, what are the impressions of you? Do you have your uniform on? Does it look nice? Sorry, just had to take a quick drink. Does your uniform look nice? Are you presentable? Now, bearing in mind, personal trainers may be taking classes or doing exercise, so we're not going to be perfect, especially females who maybe have to wash long hair or whatever to look their best, or whatever they're going to do makeup wise, and it gets damaged through the day. So, we need to make sure that we are looking the part when somebody comes in, because people will make first judgment calls. And also how you speak to your client and your demeanour. And whenever I've been teaching a course, one of the very obvious things that people forget to do is change level with their client. And what I mean by change level with their client is, if somebody's sitting down on a machine, you should try to get to their eye level instead of standing over them. If somebody's lying on a mat, You should be down close by them to give them support and motivation and to still be able to keep up a conversation. You should not be sitting down just for the sake of sitting down, but if you can to get to the client's level, that's okay. When it becomes laziness is when the client is maybe, let's say they're doing battle ropes, for instance, and you were sitting on a box with them having a conversation, and then the client gets up, do the battle ropes, and you remain seated. That's bad coaching. That's bad energy. People will notice that you haven't got up to support and motivate your client and are just sitting down. It's just as bad as things like being on your mobile phone unless you're actually showing the client something, and something of importance, not just a meme or the latest picture. That can be at the end of the session if you've got something like that to show the client. But I would always make sure that your demeanour and what you're exuding is up to scratch for bringing more people in to do sessions with you, to want to be around you, to be part of your group. And if you can do that and use that personality of yours, then you're going to be successful. People want to be around that. So when we look at people who don't have good personalities, this is where we start to see them struggle. How does somebody, when they don't get on with people, and I have seen this. I've seen it a good few times in different gyms. God knows why people were paying for some of these trainers, but they just don't get on with anybody. So they have a dour face, and if you don't know the word dour, it just means sour or not a nice expression on their face. When they're training their clients, that's terrible. If you've got a bad looking, or not a bad looking face, obviously we all have our face, we can't do anything about it. But if you have a scowling face or a resting bitch face, then why would somebody want to train with you? They see it. The people in the gym notice it. And even if you portray yourself as somebody else on social media and they come in and see that, they aren't going to spend time with you. They're going to maybe want a refund. They're going to tell people not to train with you. Again, when we have personal trainers who haven't done due diligence and start to speak about subjects they don't know about, that's when we also see a very big turn away from clientele. And this can be as simple as not knowing your anatomy. Now, you don't need to know the bone attachment points and where the scapula and the shoulder meet. You don't need to know everything in particular to be a good personal trainer, because at the end of the day, if you are training general population, you can make a massive difference to their lives without having to know pinpoint information. Although it's always handy to make sure that you know these things, and if you can, you've always got your manuals to go back to. So I would always recommend having them stored on your phone or at home on a laptop, or in your library if you have a physical version like me. So yeah, if you don't know your stuff and you start to tell your client something and then they speak that to somebody else who does know their stuff, that's when trouble starts. That's when the client starts to think, well, what does my personal trainer actually know? And they start doubting you. And then if they see other cracks in the arsenal, like the personality, the helpfulness not being there, they're not going to continue training with you. So these are secret things that, although we don't talk too much about it in the personal training industry or the fitness industry in general, we are living in a day and age where these are things we now have to start speaking about, because they used to be taken for granted. It used to be taken for granted that personal trainers were experts in what they do and had the personality for what they do and were good people in general and not just out to make a quick buck. And also, above and beyond that, were also of good manners. But now we're seeing manners disappear. I always said to people I'm training that, especially when you see their answers when you're having to correct a workbook, one of the questions they ask at level 2 is, what would you do if you have somebody ask you a question and you're already busy with somebody else? And it's a very simple question, but the amount of incorrect answers we get to it is staggering. And don't get me wrong, sometimes people misinterpret the question and they genuinely will get it correct second time round. But there is times when I've had to go back 3-4 times to somebody because they just don't have the manners. And then when we see their videos of them training clients, that comes across in the way they coach. And the majority of the feedback is then about how they actually speak to people. And it's not nice, if you're just directing somebody all the time instead of trying to build rapport and get conversation going and actually taking an interest. And it brings me to a quote. And this is in the ebook that we are giving away with the webinar that we're doing this week. And the quote is that the customer won't care about what you offer in your service until they know that you care. And all that is getting across to the client that you actually care about them. And when people are doing the personal training course and they get to pick who the client is, it's a friend, it's a family member, usually. In some cases it isn't, but usually it is. So why shouldn't you be showing that you care about them? And yeah, it's nerve-wracking and whatever else, but you should be showing care. Where's the care gone? Where has actually carefully telling somebody this is how to use a treadmill, where's that manners gone, that you actually tell them about the things that could go wrong as well because they might do it? And that way you've really prepared them for that. And that might seem like something that's very simple and everybody should know how to use a treadmill, but that's not the case. There's people who are good gym goers who've been going for years and they go into a gym that they don't know, and they don't know about using the equipment either. And I get that because I train people still here in Glasgow in Scotland, and when they come into a gym that they have not used and they don't know that the bike just doesn't activate when you jump on it, and it's got a dynamo and you have to cycle at a certain speed to get the dynamo to work to then activate the bike, and they don't know that, but they've been training in the gym for 4 or 5 years. It's just manners. It's just being like, just remember that bike won't activate right away, you have to pedal a little bit. Simple manners. And I think we're losing that. We're losing that as a generation, never mind as an industry. And manners don't cost anything. So I would say that is definitely a skill that more personal trainers could be doing with. especially when we come to the setting where you do most of your sales, which is a consultation. Most of the sales that you do should be in person. And again, this is something we'll kind of touch on in the webinar as well. But you should be doing consultations in person. And there's very many psychological reasons for that. But also, we have to think about the other person and how they feel about it. Have you ever, and this is going to be one of the first points of the webinar, have you ever put yourself in your client's shoes? Have you ever thought about how the person that you're going to train feels? Now, you might remember how you felt when you went into a gym for the first time, and that will give you an indication of maybe how somebody feels about doing personal training. But unless you've actually bought a personal trainer, unless you've been in their shoes, unless you're asking for the same goals that they're asking for and have the same background and situation they have, then you're not going to know. But you have to try imagine how that person feels and put yourself in their shoes and for you to be a good trainer. Because then you can start to think about the fears they have, the barriers they have, and the things that they personally may have to overcome to work with you. And then they will definitely see your value. It's not easy having that kind of mindset. And that's why when I think we put a post out the other day from one of the centre staff, and it said we didn't want to work with people who were just focused on money. And it's very much because one of the facts are, if you focus on money, people will see that, but then genuinely you probably won't give them the service that they require. Why would you? You have the money. So when we look at personal trainers who are really successful, they've nailed a lot of these additional skills, the personality, the manners, the communication, of the body language when people aren't speaking to you, and genuinely being a good person behind it all, because then that comes across, especially in those one-on-one situations on the gym floor or in a consultation. And bear in mind, consultations can be extremely emotional for people. Extremely emotional. It was a long time ago that I used to include weighing somebody, and I stopped weighing people around about 2014, and it's because in that 1 year I think I had 8 women crying, and men. There was a man that cried as well. So it's not just exclusive to females. We all have emotions, and it's tough as a trainer to see somebody cry in front of you, and it can leave you not knowing what to do for a start. And I think the best thing to do is obviously empathise, sympathise, but to remind them that it's okay. And I very much sympathise with people who want to lose weight, and for me, that was a big thing for helping people, because most of the people who wanted to train with me, that was their goal. It still is 90% of the population's goal, is to lose weight in some form. So when people started to cry, and it was because I brought out the scale. And it was mandatory when the gyms that I worked at in 2014 and 2015, that I had to weigh people. So it was 2015 I actually stopped weighing people in consultations, because we had a 3-part consultation, and part 1 and 3 involved them getting on a scale. In fact, part 3 definitely. Part 1 was optional. And we had to do their body metrics, and we would give them a fat percentage. They could see where their fat was stored in their body. It was a great device, but it brought people to tears, because then they knew how actual fat they were, or how much body fat they were carrying, not fat that they were, and what weight they were. And when people heard these numbers, they broke down, because they didn't realise how far they'd let things go, and how far they drifted from maybe the person they once were, or the ideals they have as a person. Nobody wakes up and thinks, I want to be unhealthy and I want to be overweight. They generally, a lot of the time, over circumstance, years, and whatever's went on, end up that way. So we have to be able to actually sympathise and not just think, wow, those are big digits, those are big numbers. And I can do that easily, because I've been there. I was quite overweight at one point in my life, and I turned it around, and I've had 6-packs, and I don't have a 6-pack currently, unless you count the one in my fridge. But, you know, it's one of those things where not everybody, as a personal trainer, is going to have been fat. Some personal trainers have never been fat in their life, so they find it hard to understand where somebody would go wrong and let themselves get into the kind of state that they can get into. And I always remember a woman who came out at over 50% body fat, and she was in tears, and she showed me the pictures of how she used to be, and she told me her life story, and we did work together. We worked together for a good while, and we got the body fat back into the 30s, back into like safety, you know, because at that point, at 50%, we're talking like not immediate death, because that's not what's the reality of it. But you know, there's so many things that can go wrong when you're that kind of body fat percentage, and you are at that point clinically obese. So we worked together. We worked together for a number of months, and she went back to her own country, and she's still living a happy life. She's not put on the weight again, but she's not what you would call extremely skinny. She's just happy. And sometimes that's all they need to get from you, is to get the happiness back. And I was so glad to see that happen for her. And every single one of the clients that I've ever dealt with, it's obviously such a big thing when you see them get to their goals. And the reality is, that's what they pay you for. That's why we get paid good money. But we also need to have the manners, the empathy, the sympathy, the understanding of their plight, the thought processes that match up with theirs, the things that they're going to be able to do for you, and the things that they won't do for you. You know, like that. This woman was never going to use MyFitnessPal to track her goals. So instead, I got her to put her hand next to her plate every night and take pictures and show me when she came into the session, so I could gauge how big a portion size she was having, because she wasn't going to portion out food. She told me this. She came from a family that doesn't portion out foods, so they just have what they have, and that's all I wanted to see nutrition wise, so I could gauge her calories and then factor in all that stuff for myself and say, you're on the right track, or can we just take a little bit of a smaller portion next time? instead of doing portion control, I could see what she was taking on a daily basis and make judgment calls, and it worked. Again, just reducing the size she was taking instead of saying, we need you to reduce portions, because that family didn't do portion control. It was just a case of, she would say, this is my food for today, that's all I'm taking, I've had enough. Instead of saying, oh, I've got a diet I'm on. She could eat what she wanted, but she just had to control the portion size. That does sound a little bit of a kind of contradictory term, but it worked for her. And again, that's what we need to look at, is what is going to work and what won't. Put yourself in your client's shoes and then come out the best version of them. What will they do for you? Because they believe in you, because your personality has said that you are successful and that you will actually succeed for them, with them, and be there on the journey the whole time. Again, that client saw success and many more as well. So I think we'll leave it there for today, because we're already at 36 minutes. But I could speak a long time on these aspects of being a successful trainer. The personality is something that we cannot teach people in a course. Personality is something we cannot teach. We could explain how to go about things, but your personality is what people are going to buy into. And if you don't have a good personality, you can try fake it, but I wouldn't think it's a good idea. And if you've worked in any kind of service industry, be it as a barmaid or a barman or somebody who works with the public in any kind of circumstance, and you don't have the personality to deal with somebody, then it's going to be a very hard game being a personal trainer. If you don't have that energy that you can pick it up and go and make things energetic, then it's going to be hard for you to be a personal trainer, because people need that energy. Sometimes they come in from work and they have none themselves, and they have to drain that energy from you. So, yeah, let's think about that today. Add it into those thought processes, that if you want to be a personal trainer, that you start to think about all the things you do that maybe not come natural, like thinking about the person you're going to possibly train in the future and putting yourself in their shoes. Think about your manners and your mannerisms and the things that you do naturally, and how you stand when you're in a crowd, and do you listen more than you talk, which is rich coming from me. Again, you only learn things when you listen. Try to remember that. And again, personality wise, if you don't know what personality you are, I would recommend, and I can't remember the website off the top of my head, but it's called 16 Personalities. And it basically goes off the premise that there is 16 personalities, but there's all sorts of different types. And if you know anything about this, then by all means, you're already ahead of the game. I myself is what is called an INFJ advocate, and it's a very, very small portion of the population that has that type of personality. And it just basically is that we like to help others, we like to promote others, and that probably comes across and maybe what we do at IPT, because that's some of the foundational thought processes, because I'm not the only advocate in the group, there is a good few of us. But you should definitely go and see what personality type you come as, because then that will help you understand you, and then understand how you can meet other people's personalities and get on with them. So again, I've maybe went on again too much there, but we're going to stop now, and hopefully that's been a nice, helpful podcast to you all. And until next week, have a great one, and hopefully I will see you on the webinar on Thursday. Speak soon. IPT out.